think we can start the recording. Let me just introduce today's speaker as well as the discussant. So we are privileged to welcome Dr. Kapambwe Mwelwa, a researcher and lecturer from the University of Zambia, who is presenting on the relevance of selected social science degree programs on skills development and graduate employability in Zambia. He holds a PhD from the University of South Africa, and his thesis was entitled Exploring Social Sciences Degree Programs Effectiveness on Skills Development and Graduate Employability in Zambia. So he examined how Zambian university might enhance skills development and graduate employability in social science programs. He has over 10 years experience researching and teaching on higher education in Zambia. His current research work focuses on university graduates' work readiness and rethinking the role of university industry collaborations for graduate employability in Zambia. Our discussant for today is Dr. Sam Fongwa. As Dr. Sam Fongwa is a senior research specialist at the Human Sciences Research Council in Pretoria, South Africa. He has vast experience in issues related to higher education, skills development, and employability. Dr. Mwelwa, you have 30 minutes to present. Thereafter, our discussant will have 10 to 15 minutes to reflect on your presentation. Thereafter, we'll open the BBT to the audience. So the ball is in your hands. So all the best in your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mboyonga. I'm deeply humbled to be given this wonderful opportunity to share the findings from one of my studies and one of the papers that we have published. I hope that you are getting me.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me proceed then. Thank you so much. You, the organizer this particular event, and also Dr. Fongwa for accepting to be the discussant for this particular presentation. Let me now share my slides and go straight into the presentation. I first want to provide the context in which this research was undertaken, and also just to state that this presentation is premised on a paper that has already been published together with my other co-authors. I want to begin by stating that the interest in undertaking this particular research emanated from the fact that in the previous few years, we've had a number of social science graduates coming out of the universities, and the majority of them not being able to get the jobs that they desire to get. And because of that, I started asking myself, what could be the reason why those in social sciences are not able to find the jobs compared to those in STEM-related subject or programs, and hence the need for this investigation. So the presentation outline for today will be to provide the context, like I have already alluded to, introduction, background, methodology. I'll speak to the theoretical framework that was used, the findings and the discussion, the conclusion, and then look at the implications of this particular study. So in terms of providing the context, Zambia, like any other country, aspires to become a middle-income country by the year 2030. And this, we believe, that can be achieved by investing in human resource. And the policy direction in the higher education sector in Zambia is to ensure that the kind of higher education that is provided is quality and relevant to the needs of the labor industry, so that we can enhance development in the country. What we have seen is that between the year 2015 and 2019, we have the country has recorded an increase in the number of those enrolling in higher learning institutions and specifically the universities. The statistics show that over 95,000 students have enrolled in both the public and private universities. As you may be aware, Zambia has less than 10 public universities, and the majority of them, numbering up to 50 plus, are private universities. Now, what has been obtaining also is the fact that the majority of those graduating from these institutions in the past 4 to 5 years have been in the fields of social sciences and not in the STEM-related programs. As you can see from this particular graduation trends from the Higher Education Authority, talking about the graduation trends from 2014 to 2018. Now, as you can see, there is an international classification of the different study program. I should state this at the outset so that to provide the context in which this particular study was conducted. When you look at the first top 3 programs, there is art and humanities as well as social sciences. These 3 in this particular study were considered as one as social sciences. That is how they were classified, because the majority of the programs in the education related programs. And so when you look at this particular table, you'll be able to see that the number of graduates from these core sources has been higher compared to those who are coming from the So what has been obtaining here in this country is that a number of graduates that are coming out of the universities, most of them are lacking the practical skills that are needed.
Mwelwa, we are not seeing your slides, sorry. Your slides are not moving.
Oh, the slides. Oh, okay. Okay, probably let me do this. Can I reshare them again?
Yes, please.
Okay, let me just stop sharing and then reshare. Sorry for that.
So we can see your slides. They just need to be, you just need to select slideshow. And then move
that I did, that I did, but I do not know why they are not moving. Are they moving now?
We're on the introduction slide at the moment.
Probably, let me remove the slideshow and just move with the slides. Maybe that will help. Are they moving now?
You stopped sharing, so we can't see them at all at the moment.
Oh, I'm so sorry for this. Are you able to see them now? I'm sharing now.
Yes, we can. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry for that. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that the majority of the graduates that have been coming out of the universities have been labeled not to have the practical skills that are demanded by the labor industry. And research has shown that this has been affecting productivity in the country. And many research works have revealed that most of the higher learning institutions are not adequately equipping graduates with the relevant skills. And because of this, we find that most of them are not able to find jobs. And what is interesting is that 50% of those who have actually been getting into the universities are coming from the social science fields. And since these are coming from the social science fields, these appear to be at variance with the national strategic direction of promoting STEM skills, which are in short supply in this particular country. And because of that, we find that the majority of them have not been able to find the jobs that they want, they really need, because they are perceived as having relevant skills. And this has ultimately created a mismatch between the skills that are given by the universities and the skills that are needed by the labor industry. When we look at the unemployment statistics in this country, we find that in 2019, we had 12.5% youth unemployment, and the graduate unemployment also increased from 11.4%. Youth unemployment increased from 11.4% to 17.9% in 2019. And these statistics are worrying because it appears they are increasing every day. And this signifies the fact that most of our graduates from the universities are not able to get the jobs that they need. And again, what we see also is that there has been a shaky or a very weak relationship between the universities themselves or the higher learning institutions and the labor industry where our graduates end up being employed. And a number of studies have been undertaken in order to see how we can promote skills development in the universities and ensure that our graduates are employable. But however, the majority of the studies that have been undertaken are focused on technical education and vocational and entrepreneurship, as well as STEM program. And this is because when people talk about the issue of skills development, they always relate this conversation of skills development to the STEM-related field. And this is basically coming from the supposition that in the social science degree program, probably there are no specific practical skills that are given to the students or graduates. And hence the focus of this particular study to find out what kind of skills are these graduates being exposed to so that they can be employable as they get out there in the labor industry. So the aim is to explore the extent to which 4 social science degree programs from the selected universities were relevant to the skill needs of the labor industry in Zambia in order to ensure that we promote graduate employability. And 2 key objectives were focused on in this particular study. Number 1 was to ascertain the relevance of the 4 social science degree programs from the selected universities to the skill needs of the job market in Zambia. And secondly, wanted to determine what constituted graduate employability in the 4 social science degree programs from the selected universities in Zambia. This particular study is very important, especially where we are saying most of our graduates who are coming out of the universities are not able to get the jobs that they really need. And so this particular study was very timely, especially where we see that the government is very much concerned with the outcomes or the graduate outcomes from the different universities that we have in the country. Also considering the fact that the aspect of employability is so much linked to the quality of the higher education provided by the universities. I want to briefly provide some operational definitions of the concepts that were used in this particular study. Like I stated in the preamble, social sciences deal studies or programs that deal with human relations. And in this regard, when I talk about social sciences collectively, I'm talking about those programs that are non-STEM programs focusing on the arts, humanities, education, and the social sciences themselves. The skills that we are talking about refer to the possession of knowledge, attributes, and competencies that any graduate from a degree program may be required to execute when they are given an opportunity for a job, so that they are able to demonstrate that they understand what is it that it takes for them to undertake that particular job. And of interest to us is the distinction between technical, that is job-specific skills, and generic skills. And these generic skills in this particular conversation, I'll relate to them as employability skills. And these are also referred to as transferable skills, which are very important. And these generic skills or employability skills are very pertinent, especially on a conversation that focuses on skills in social sciences, which do not provide what are clearly well-defined practical skills as it were. Graduate employability in the course of this particular discussion refers to the effective use of acquired skills, attributes, and knowledge, individual agency, and also looking at the prevailing labor conditions to create, maintain, and secure employment opportunities after one has graduated. And it must be stated here that there is a distinction between employment and employability. This particular study focused on employability and not employment. Employability is about a graduate being fit to take up a career and not necessarily being guaranteed a job, which we call employment. When we talk about employability skills development, we are talking about the different activities these graduates before graduating are exposed to so that they can acquire the necessary competences that they need in order for them to be work ready and take up the opportunities in the labor industry. This particular study was also interesting because I think for the first time we tried to use the human capability approach, and I've not come across several studies that have integrated the human capability approach in the Zambian context, except maybe for a few studies that have come up after this one. So the study was framed within the human capability approach, and these were actually triangulated with the human capital theory and the screening hypothesis, considering that we are looking at aspect of skills and the credentials that the graduates are supposed to have. And as we may already be aware, we know that the human capability approach was conceptualized by Amartya Sen, and some other later works improved upon this particular theory. And it is premised on assessing individual well-being in the context of what are called functionings and capabilities. And of course, not forgetting about the aspect of the conversion factors. So the argument is that individuals should have freedom or variable opportunities in order for them to pursue and live the kind of life that they value. In the context of university education, what we are saying is that university education should empower graduates with the skills and give them the real freedom of being skilled and employable. So in this regard, what we're basically trying to say is that these employability skills that the graduates should be able to reflect their worthy through the screening hypothesis. As you may be aware, employers look at the credentials someone presents before them and see whether they are fit to take up the job. And also their productivity coming from the human capital theory. And also being able to see whether what they have acquired, the freedoms and the opportunities that they have been increased so that they can be employed and enjoy themselves and enhance their well-being. And their well-being in the context of this particular study was employability. Now, when it comes to literature review, what was coming out are the different conceptualization of what employability is and what really these skills that are needed by the labor industries are. When we look at the concept of employability, different scholars, Kinash, Rib, and Jackson, and many others, you find that they look at employability, some from the student point of view, that a student must possess certain skills, and others look at it from also the labor industry point of view, that we may not talk about the conversation of employability without including the labor industry, where these graduates should be able to be employed or employ themselves depending on the prevailing condition. What was also actually coming out of the literature review with regards to the skills that are offered by the social science degree program is that this social science degree program, unlike STEM programs, they do not offer specific practical skills that one can use to define their career pathway. And because of that, they are referred generally to as generalist programs because of the skills that they give. Therein lies the importance of embedding the employability or transferable skills to ensure that these graduates are in a position to be able to use these employability skills as they get into the labor industry. And so literature was reviewed from the different continents here in sub-Saharan Africa and also here in Zambia. And what is coming out is that the issue of skills development and the employability is actually context bound and does not mean the same in the different context. And hence the need for us to look at employability in this context. Briefly on the methodology employed in this particular study was a mixed methods design where both quantitative and qualitative approaches were used, and the sample of the study was 162, and a number of different techniques were used to collect the data, to analyze the data, and triangulating the data to ensure its scientific rigor, and so on and so forth. When we come to the results of this particular study, what is obtaining is that we have two questions before us. We are asking ourselves, how relevant are the four social science degree programs from the selected universities to the skill needs of the labor market? Or to what extent are the 4 social science degree programs from the selected universities to the skill needs of the labor market? And the 4 social science degree programs that were considered or selected from the universities that participated in this study are the Bachelor of Social Work, the Bachelor of Public Administration. There was also the Bachelor of Education and the Bachelor of Development Studies. The second question is, what constituted graduate employability in the 4 social science degree programs? So answering these 2 questions helped us to assess the relevance of the social science degree programs in enhancing skills development and graduate employability in the Zambian context. So when it comes to what was found was that when it comes to the skills development, 2 aspects came out. That to tell whether the social science degree programs were promoting skills development as required by the labor industry, we need to assess the importance and needs of these programs in the context of the requirements by the labor industry. And number 2, that we need to look at the demand of the social science degree programs in the universities where they are offered. On the second question, where we are looking at our graduate employability was being perceived from these 4 social science degree programs, 3 important factors came out, and these are the availability of job prospects for the social science degree program qualification, graduate work readiness, and perception of employability skills in the social science degree program by both those in the higher education sector and those in the labor industry. And moving forward, I elaborate on this. So, talking about the first question, to what extent are the 4 social science degree programs from the selected universities relevant to the skill needs of the job market in Zambia? 2 major themes emerged: the need and importance, as well as the demand for the same program. So, when it came to the importance of the 4 social science degree programs, the qualitative data from the key informant interviews actually revealed that people had mixed expressions of views about the value of social work, the value of development studies as a program, the value of public administration, and the value of education, focusing on social studies or social sciences, and that others also were of the view that generally these programs were important, they were vital in our community, as we shall see later on. But others were of the view that they played a secondary and supportive role to the STEM qualifications in the labor industry, that you cannot create jobs just focusing on this social science degree program, but they play a supportive role when those in the hard sciences create these opportunities which we are talking about. But what was coming out also is the fact that these social science degree programs are very important because they help us to have a clear understanding of human societies and the interactions therein. Without social sciences, it will be very difficult to ensure that there is morality within our societies, to ensure that people are able to follow the law, to ensure that people are not engaging in violence, and many other things we can talk about. So, what is coming out clearly is that there are variations in terms of the perceptions that are coming out in terms of how valuable these social science degree programs were contributing to the skill needs of the labor industry. And in this regard, we find that compared to the physical sciences, social sciences are generalist disciplines that do not give graduates specific skills and clearly defined pathway. And this is with the exception of social sciences like law and economics that have a clearly defined pathway. When it comes to the demand for the social science degree program, specifically focusing on the 4 that were considered in this particular program, what was coming out is that their demand in the different universities where they are offered also had to speak to how relevant they were in the labor industry. But what came out is that after the 2014, 2018, 2019 period, there has been a decline in the number of learners enrolling in these social science degree programs. Of the 4 programs, it was found or revealed that the Bachelor of Social Work degree indicated some popularity and that it was in high demand compared to the others, even on the labor market. In this regard, we could see and conclude, we can tell that those who took the Bachelor of Social Work stood a better chance of being employed compared to the others who were employed in the other fields that we have alluded to. And in this regard, what we are saying is that the 4 social science degree programs were relevant in different ways depending on how they were perceived. The enrollments had declined in the Bachelor of Education, for instance, in the Bachelor of Public Administration, in the Bachelor of Development Studies. There were very few people who were enrolling in those particular programs. And the explanation that we can give, for instance, if we relate this to the human capability approach, is the fact that the perception that people had about the qualification that was coming from this particular, these other particular fields we are talking about was negative. They were thinking that the credentials that they were to get will not give them the niche or the attraction that they require in the labor industry in order for them to pick up jobs. When it comes to the second question, where we are talking about what constituted graduate employability in the 4 social science degree programs, 3 major themes emerged from this particular study. Number one is the perception that the employer and the students have about the employability skills, graduate work readiness, and the prospects of job availability. Now, when you look at this particular table, it is premised on the 5-point Likert scale, where we are asking a question how the employers and the students, the graduating students, were satisfied with these employability skills which they obtained from the programs they were undertaking. What came out was that the students overrated themselves, while employers underrated the students, and employers were not happy or satisfied with several of the employability skills that we have referred to here. Employability skills such as professionalism, critical thinking, accountability, and so on and so forth. Now, when we look at this particular table, which I've just shown you, where there are some variations in terms of looking at how important certain employability skills are, you will be able to appreciate the fact that probably there is no common understanding between the universities themselves as well as those in the labor industry as to which employability skills are so important, as to which transferable skills are very important in order for a graduate to be able to get a job or to be in a position to get and keep a job and succeed at it. And what was coming out also from the qualitative study, or the qualitative findings of this particular study, is that these transferable skills, analytical skills, innovative skills, adaptability skills, interpersonal skills are very, very important for someone's graduate employability. And therefore, it is very important that in the universities, we are able to focus on how we can make sure that the graduates in the social science degree programs are exposed to these employable skills in order for them to stand a chance of succeeding in the labor industry. And these are just some of the skills that came out of this particular study, that they were very critical for someone who is taking a social degree program that is described. In this regard, what we can say is that there is no uniformity and a clear defined structure in terms of how these employability skills are supposed to be assessed by both the universities themselves as well as the labor industry where the graduates actually tend to be employed. When it comes to graduate work readiness, what this particular study revealed is that most of the graduates, as they leave the university, they are actually not ready for work. And because of that, most of the labor industry organizations that employed graduates coming from the social sciences had to spend some money in order to retrain these so that they can fit in their jobs. One coming from the labor industry said that there is a big problem with regards to the quality and competence of the graduates, right from the university level up to the colleges. Some gaps have been noted, and these gaps do not lie in the social sciences, which is the subject matter, but even in the physical sciences themselves. Regardless of what field, regardless of what qualification, what profession, when they employ someone from the university college, or college mostly, they have to retrain them for some time before they become productive. So this is speaking to the aspect of whether the graduates we are producing are being work ready or not. Already, the indication from the labor industry is that they are not work ready. The last point is about the availability of graduate job prospects. From the 4 social science degree programs that were considered, what came out was that for those who were doing the Bachelor of Social Work, they had more job prospects compared to those who were doing the other programs. I must state here that at this particular time when this study was being conducted, in Zambia, as you may have heard, the 30,000 teachers were not employed. And because of that, we find that even those who had undertaken a teaching job, specifically focusing in social sciences, a Bachelor of Development Studies or public administration, they did not have many job prospects. And having job prospects an indicator of whether the qualification obtained from these social science fields not being very relevant the needs of the employers at that particular study. In conclusion, what we are saying is that despite the 4 social science degree programs being perceived as relevant or important, they are relevant to the needs of the program. And we are saying that the relevance of each of these depended on
Mwelwa, the sound is quite bad. We are not getting you. Hello?
I lost am I allowed, Dr. Mboyonga, to conclude?
Yes, but you can switch off your camera. Probably it's affecting the strength of the network.
Am I allowed?
Yes, but switch off your camera,
I
please.
wish I got that at the beginning. Okay, let me Okay, let me conclude this way. In which each of the 4 social programs were relevant to the needs of the labor market. And one of the reasons was that the perceptions varied in terms of how they were perceived by those in the labor industry and the students themselves. And in this regard, we are saying the relevance of the 4 social science degree programs diminished due to the low demand for them. And in this regard, we can argue that it is important to have the same perception with regards to how important these social science degree programs are. And it is important that we begin having this conversation to try and appreciate the fact that the social science degree programs are also relevant and they provide unique skills and knowledge that is needed in the labor industry. And the implications of this particular study, finally, are that graduate employability in social sciences is complex and multi-faced, and what has been provided in this particular study is by no means conclusive, and that there is need for a clear articulation of the program knowledge and skills outcomes for the social science degree programs that are offered in the universities. The other thing is that also the teaching methods in social sciences should promote the acquisition of competences that are outlined in the National Qualification Framework in order to enhance the employability of these graduates. We need to build capacity in academia on how employability skills in social sciences can fully be integrated in the curriculum, be taught, be evaluated without just emphasizing on disciplinary knowledge. How do we assess the learners so that we can cater for these employability skills? And finally, since the STEM and business courses or programs are on demand on the labor market, then we may strategically need to integrate some of these courses, STEM and business courses, in the social science degree programs in order to enhance the acquisition of both technical and the generic skills through a multidisciplinary approach. And dealing with this issue of employability from this study implies that what is coming out is that the fact that it requires a multi-stakeholder approach in order to have a common understanding so that we can enhance the employability of our graduates. Thank you so much for your time. I end here for now, and I'm waiting to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mwelwa, for this wonderful presentation. I will now call upon Dr. Sam Fongwa, the discussant.
Thank you very much, Edward, and thank you once more to Dr. Mwelwa for the presentation. I have a few comments to make on the paper. I had the opportunity to read the full paper, so some of the things that I might say might link to the paper, not necessarily to the presentation. I think the first point that I want to make is that this is a very relevant area of research. I mean, generally, but also close to my heart in terms of the work that I have been doing and I'm still doing. I think this is a good example of a paper. Much often you see papers and they claim to be mixed method approaches, but they are not. They are either qualitative with some quantitative data or vice versa. But this paper has really tried to be mixed method in the way the methodology was conceived, using both statistical tests and regression analysis with the interviews to integrate them in this analysis. I think one area which I think, and I'll talk about that, is at the level of the conceptual section of the paper, which is, it tries to bring in a whole range of concepts, capabilities, human capital. There was this concept which a pragmatic approach as well, which was new to me. But at the end of the day, the paper really could have focused on one, and either the capability and human development or the human capital, which ends up not really holding on one and using it, the key concepts or the tenets of the approach. When I read through the paper, I struggle to find out what the argument really is. There is a lot of very rich data. There's a lot of really rich findings. But and we're having a seminar internally at the HSRC recently. What is the argument? What is the paper trying to say? And there are a couple of very interesting arguments which I could pull out from. One is the complex and multifaceted nature of social science or degree programs to employment. And that's true. And then move on to try to show how that plays out. Or maybe to be able to make the argument that some social science programs are more employable than others, and why that is so. That could have been another argument, but much simpler. But maybe a more complex one would have been, there is a significant misalignment between social science skills development and labor market needs in Zambia, which is actually quite established in elite literature. However, there is that I find that there was not really that clearness. All 3 points came through, but not really well articulated. I think the other point that I wanted to make is that and now in the presentation that has come out much better, because in the paper I felt like the paper was basing its argument on the youth unemployment data and not on the graduate unemployment data. And if you look at Zambia with a very low university participation rate of about less than 10%, if not 7%, and then it might actually lead to a point where you feel that there is a high number of youths without qualifications, and then that becomes the base on which the argument was being made. But from the presentation, it has been shown that there is a slightly higher unemployment rate of graduates at 12%, So if that's the case, then I misread it in the paper itself. Otherwise, we might find ourselves with what happened in South Africa a few years ago, where we had this discussion until when there was a research that showed that the graduate unemployment in South Africa is actually exaggerated, because it was less than 5% of graduate unemployment. But when we include youth unemployment in the discourse, it makes it look like a very big problem, which is not. Also interesting was for me was the very low participation rate of those in the labor market in Zambia who have a degree or post-secondary education, which is 6%. Only 6% of those in the labor market had any kind of post qualification, compared to 43% with primary education. And so that begins to shape the context in which, are we talking about general unemployment, or are we talking about youth unemployment, or are we talking about graduate unemployment? But then, as I said, that has come through much clearer. I think one of the for me, a limitation of the paper at the bigger level is that the authors miss to really problematize the tension that has always existed within the literature around the function of the university. I find it kind of a narrow conceptualization focusing on the skills discourse, which is a very important discourse, but the university has a much broader mandate. If you look either which has been affected largely by marketization forces, neoliberal thinking, but also now increasingly new managerialism, where departments and faculties need to raise money for themselves, get graduates, and all of that. But if you go back a step back and look at either from the Humboldtian notion of the university, or the Castellian or Cardinal Newman's idea for a university, the university is almost supposed to be much bigger than the labor market, and graduate outcome or graduate output must go beyond just being able to get to acquire jobs. And this, I think, was an opportunity for the authors to actually nail down this point, and that is what our previous research, led by even Professor Walker, has always tried to push back on employers and push back on society, saying that we are producing people who are much bigger or broader than tools for the labor market, and it's important for them to be able to get those skills, but that's not the mandate of the university. And I think that could have been a very strong point to be made. And I will not belabor the point, because if we actually went into the human development or capability literature, which unfortunately wasn't really present, because I actually did a search on Sen or Walker or Nussbaum on the paper, and there was no reference to any of these three authors. And so it limits how much argument you can make for a much broader notion of the university, but even more so of the graduate. As I said earlier, the pragmatic approach to me was quite new, and I feel the author could have even used that more to expanded the concept for some of us who were new to it, to understand how it's applicable within the concept. But I found it quite new, and I would have wanted to read more. It was interesting. In terms of the findings of the paper, I don't know how many minutes I still have. I think three things stood out for me. The first one is around the need or the demand for social science in the labor industry. What is in the South African context is what we have as the hard to fill vacancies, or occupations in high demand. It would have been very interesting if the authors had pulled that out from the Zambian context to say, these are the occupations in high demand, these are the hard to fill vacancies, and this is how much the social sciences are in need, and they don't have, and we're not having them filling these vacancies. Because using the perceptions of people is quite important, but that needs to be triangulated, in my opinion, to hard facts that's actually happening in the real life in the labor market. And so in the South African context, it would have been very easy to pull out the occupations in high demand, or to pull out the hard to fill vacancies, to say this is what is happening. Does it align or not to what the perceptions are saying? But even more to that, as the paper tries to do, is to highlight the contextual factors which go beyond what the university is doing. The nature of the economy. Is it growing or is it shrinking? The sectors in which the economy is functioning. The nature of the structural on employment. That takes away some of these expectations from the university, because there are other factors that are playing as to how much demand can happen for the graduates. The second point is the employer-student perceptions about skills. It's always complex, and if you brought in the lecturers, you have even maybe a different perception. If you brought in university management, you have a different perception. If you brought in government, so there's always this tension of perceptions or perceptions between what the university is doing, what the students are looking for, what the employers are looking for, what the society in general is looking for. And so while employers are always looking for finished products, that is not the business of the university to produce finished products. In fact, even in the STEM sciences, the accountants, the doctors, the nurses, they still have to go for training, sometimes 2 years, 3 years, to be able to get the skills that the employers want. We don't have that in the humanities. And so that point also could have been used to strengthen this tension between the expectations of employers and what the university is supposed to be doing. The third point and last point that I wanted to make here is around the second question, which constitutes what constitutes employability. And from the paper, the answer to this question was largely depending on the perceptions of what or the demand of the courses. In fact, we should know that most of the humanities and social science courses, students end up there because they cannot be admitted to some of the more difficult access courses. So increasingly, you realize that there is a high demand or a low demand in these courses, not because the courses in themselves are in demand, but because they cannot access other courses. But secondly, and more importantly, I would have loved to see the analysis of the curriculum of the courses, the pedagogy, things around work integrated learning, internships and the like, which are there or not there, and which affect the quality or the job readiness of the graduates. That would have been a very interesting set of analysis to say this course has a 2 months or a 3 months or a 6 months internship, compulsory or non-compulsory, or work study program, which now begins to constitute what employability is supposed to be. And then in conclusion, I'll conclude with 3 or so questions. The first question is, how did we establish that social work is more employable based on table 4? Unfortunately, the audience here have not seen the table 4, but from table 4, there is and I hope Dr. Mwelwa will be able to reflect on that, because it's also for my own understanding. I feel like there was higher demand for the Bachelor of Education at 83%, the Bachelor of the Development Studies at 70%, and not the Bachelor of Social Work at 64%. So I wasn't really sure how the Bachelor of Social Work became or was perceived as more employable. I would just need some clarity on that. The second question that I wanted to ask, if you could help, is how do we conclude that the programs were less effective in promoting skills development, as said in the conclusion, and also not relevant to the market, if we haven't done the analysis of, firstly, the curriculum, the pedagogy, and the other aspects that are supposed to enhance curriculum, but even more so, to look at the occupations in high demand and the hard to fill vacancies, or look at some of the adverts. We did some work at the HSRC. We're looking at adverts on Career Junction and Indeed to see how much is being demanded, what are the skills that are being demanded for social work or the four programs, and how does that relate to the curriculum and the pedagogy that's being offered there. I think in conclusion, I don't think you need to reflect on that, but it was just the fact that how was the human capital theory used? You spoke about that here, but I think that it would have been really interesting to put the human capital and human capability in discussion here. But maybe that point we can leave it out, because it's clear from the paper that the emphasis was on the pragmatic approach and not really on human capital or human capability. Again, I really want to say that thank you for the opportunity to talk on this paper. It's always relieving to speak on the paper that has already been published, because you really don't, you are not careful about what is being said, because it's not going to get into the paper. But it's also a bit frustrating because you feel like your comments are not going to go anywhere. But thank you very much. And it was a good read. I managed to really read through all of the paper. and I had 4 pages of notes. Unfortunately, I don't have all the time, but it was a good read of the paper. I'll stop here. I'm sorry I've taken more than 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Fongwa. Dr. Mwelwa, just maybe you can reflect on the discussant views, answer 1 or 2 questions before we open it for Q&A.
Dr. Fongwa, thank you so much for those insights that you have brought out regarding this particular paper. I really appreciate. You have touched on quite a number of things. Others, I'll just acknowledge them. Indeed, if they were part of the paper, they would have strengthened this particular paper. And probably this is emanating from the fact that sometimes we may not have the same perception as we are looking at these things. Otherwise, I really appreciate your input. And please don't think that the comments that you have made are not going to work because the paper is already published. Probably another paper speaking to these things can be published. The table 4 that you are referring to begin with, Professor Dr. Fongwa, for those who have not looked at it, basically, it was just talking about comparing the students or the graduating students from the 4 social science degree programs and what their aspirations were supposed to be after they graduate. Others were saying, I'm going to seek employment. Others were saying, going to get into self-employment. And others were saying, I'm going to further my studies. And I think what we obtained from this was basically to try and appreciate the fact that most of the graduates, when they complete their programs, what they are looking for is to be employed. And actually, that is part of the conversation of employability, like we are saying. But of course, it must be stated here that the focus, like you have said, for the universities is not just to produce graduates who will go there and get jobs, but getting a job is part of it. But that is not what employability is. Employability is having what it takes for you to be able to succeed in the labor industry, even when you have not gotten that particular job. But those who graduate from these different programs, when they are not employed, they add to the graduate and employment statistics, and this is what was brought out in this particular study. You talk about the pragmatic approach. This study was a mixed methods approach, and it was felt that the pragmatic approach, which allows you to pursue a particular problem in whichever way you think is possible so that you can come up with a solution to that particular problem. That is what we focused on when we are dealing with the issue of graduate employability in the research. And let me state that this particular research or paper was focusing just on one of the objectives of the larger study. And therefore, you'd find that some of the issues that you have brought out, for instance, talking about issues of curriculum and pedagogy, have been brought out in other parts of the larger study that was done in order to see how also the industry was coming in order to ensure that these graduates are equipped with the skills that the labor industry needs. Like you have rightly put it, it is not the sole responsibility of the universities to develop these skills we are talking about. The labor industry should also be part and parcel of this particular process. I've taken note of most of the issues that you have brought out, and I'll be able to reflect on them and see how this will help shape the future research works that are being done in this particular area. I think I rest my case here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I will now allow some comments or questions from the audience. If you can't raise your hand, you are free to put your questions in the chat box. Yes, Melan, you can go ahead.
Thanks very much, Edward, and thanks very much to Dr. Mwelwa for a very interesting paper, and to Sam for very thorough and thoughtful response. So all in all, I thought it was great. I have a question for clarification, a comment for information, and then a question about the research. So the comment for information is that you might find it useful to look at the book that Sam and I wrote. I just quickly checked the bibliography in your paper, and I see it's not cited there. I've not had time to look at the paper, but you might find it just interesting in terms of the approach that we took. The question for clarification, which puzzled me slightly, if I've understood correctly, one of your slides looked at the percentage of people whose, as I understand it, whose goal was to be employed after university. And this varied, and I was puzzled as to why somebody, you know, only 83% of, I think, social work students wanted to be employed after university. So I was just quite slightly puzzled about that and thought maybe there was something I hadn't understood there. The third comment / question is a little bit more substantive, partly picking up on what Sam has said about the labour market. So I think it's sort of a little bit tricky to say that higher education is not equipping graduates with relevant skills, because really we've got to look at what higher education is doing. And Sam raised the issue of quality, pedagogy, curriculum, work-based learning, and so on. But we've also got to look at the structure and the opportunities in the labour market. So, and then we've got to think about why those opportunities or gaps are there. So why, for example, are people with B.Ed degrees with a specialization in social sciences not able, presumably, to get jobs teaching in schools? So is it the fault of the university, or it's got something to do with the structure of the labour market and the economy? So that's a kind of a comment question. And then my last bit, if I may, is that presumably some graduates, more from social work, but some graduates from these programs presumably do get jobs. So does your data allow you to comment on who then is able to get a job with one of these 4 social science degrees? And why? You know, how does one explain how some people are getting jobs even if the majority aren't? So does it come down to social capital? Is it about gender? Is it about social class origins? Is it about other factors? So thank you for an interesting paper. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Professor. I must state that I think in the larger study, I know that you are one of the scholars that have researched and extensively used the human capability approach, and I think I've also gained a lot of interest in making use of this particular theory. One of the issues you raise is about why is it that some graduates are able to get the jobs while others are not able to get the jobs? And I think if I look at elsewhere in the larger work where I've tried to explain this, I think the issue that you mentioned about the structure of the labor market and the economy also becomes very important, which is part of the conversion factors that may really make it very difficult for someone who has graduated from the university to be able to get the job, because probably Zambia's economy is not doing very well. The economy is not expanding so that everyone can be given the job. For instance, we've had a lot of teachers that have graduated from these programs we are talking about, but they were not able to get jobs until last year when the new government came in and made sure that new teachers are given the jobs. I think this also speaks to the issue of policies that are put in place that may actually limit or make it possible for others to get the job. So there are all these different explanations that we can give emanating from the human capability approach, like you rightly put it. And this is equally the same even at individual level, because sometimes the individual agents also is able to help someone to be able to get the job. Using their social capital, they know someone, they have a relative who is in a position of responsibility. Others end up getting jobs, but not everyone has built up this social capital so that they are privileged to get the job. So from that particular perspective, we find that we may not outrightly just conclude that all the graduates that are coming out of the labor industry are not being given what it takes for them to get the job, but probably it is the way the policies that we have, the way the labor industry is structured, and that is why I think an approach that focuses both on the higher education sector and the labor industry will be very important if we are to deal with the issue of employability and graduates having the jobs that they need. I don't know if you have answered to all your issues, Professor Mela.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's really helpful. Appreciate.
Thank you.
Maybe any last question or comment from someone before we sign off? Yes, Sholo.
Okay, thanks very much, Edward, and thanks for a mind elevating paper. I just wanted to make a few inputs or comments to say, I think part of the reason why we are also experiencing a high unemployment rate, especially within the social science fraternity, I think it's precisely because I think some of the students are not actually informed or on the right career path that they should actually take. Because I've actually noted that there are students who actually enroll for social science programs, but they still not familiar with the kind of careers that they should actually follow. Because I think if you are in that sector, you should actually consider, looking for employment in NGOs and research institutions such as the Human Science Research Council. Then you'd find some of the students are still enrolled for social science related programs, but they still, look for employment in the private sector. Then I think we need to do more in terms of enhancing our, career guidance programs at universities to inform the student on, the right and appropriate career path that they should actually take, especially when they enroll for social science related programs. Another thing which is also which I think we must also consider is that social science related programs are more research orientated programs. Then it's always ideal to encourage students to actually pursue these programs up until at least a master's level, so that they actually can enhance their or broaden their chances of actually securing employment, especially in those sectors that are actually mentioned. Those are the little inputs that I just wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Can I respond to that?
Yes, under 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think it was more or less like a comment. I just wanted to share briefly what is obtaining here in Zambia. Like I stated in the presentation, the strategic focus of the Zambian government now is on STEM or STEAM related programs. They are thinking that when they invest in these, then we are going to develop as a nation, as opposed to focusing on social sciences. So like in the public universities, even student financing for those who are opting to enroll in social sciences are not given the sponsorship. Most of them, they enrolled in these social science programs, they were left out, and they are not in the universities because they do not have the financial capacity to pay for themselves. So we can see that even the policies that are put in place by the governments also has a bearing in terms of thinking about the relevance of these social sciences, probably indirectly communicating that these are not important and we are not going to focus on them. And as such, indeed, like I stated earlier, there is need for a multi-stakeholder approach in terms of how we can deal with these issues, considering that social sciences are also very important. And how I wish that Dr. Fongwa made those remarks together with Professor Melan when the paper was in draft form, it would have strengthened it. But in any case, we'll be able to work on other papers that will be strengthened, considering the views that have been raised from this discussion. Once more, I want to thank you so much for according me the opportunity to share the findings from one of the papers I've co-authored with others. Thank you so much.
So we've now come to the end of our BBT. I just want to thank you, the presenter, the discussant, and all of you who attended. Thank you very much. Just a reminder that this was being recorded, and in 3 days' time, it will be posted on our YouTube channel. So you should feel free to check out the recording of this webinar. Thank you very much once more. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.